You're listening to The Bible Guys, a podcast where a couple of friends talk about the Bible in fun and practical ways.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Bible Guys, and guess what? Jeff is back! Yay! Yes.
Yeah.
Jeff was traveling across the world. The adventures of Marco Polo have been ended, and now
we are back in town. Back in town. Yes.
And so you are back you're glad to be back?
It's so good to be back. Yeah.
I bet you the highlight of returning to the United States is The Bible Guys.
Well, so we were scheduled the very first thing to come back into studio, and so very excited.
You were like,
I can't wait to get back to Chris.
You said to your admin, the first thing I
want. I demanded. Right.
And then does everybody know that your admin is your wife?
Yes. That's it. So
there's no demanding.
Yeah, my wife and I were on a romantic vacation in Europe.
Yes,
and then I couldn't wait to get back to studio with Chris Sarbaugh as fast as possible.
Well, hey, if you're tuning in, we are very excited because we're diving into perhaps passages of Scripture that you may not necessarily hear about on a normal sermon or a typical sermon.
Yeah.
And you may not.
And for a lot of people reading, this is like the flyover zone right here, right?
It's a flyover
Going from the East Coast to the West Coast, just fly over the Midwest.
Yeah.
This is kind of some...
Well, Leviticus, it can be some tough reading sometimes.
Every once in a while, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we're sort of skipping over some things, and we're hitting the religious festivals today.
Yeah.
So, but before we do that, we have a segment that Desiree has planned for you.
Two truths and a lie, and this is a brutally difficult one. She said, Jeff, we know that you're a big fan of grilling for others.
Yes.
And so for today's edition of Two Truths and a Lie, I have to recount 3 different grilling stories, and I have to challenge you to figure out which one isn't true.
And by the way, do you have 3 grilling stories?
I have thousands of grilling stories.
Okay, all right. But are they all good, though? I mean,
no, they're not.
Once upon a time, I made burgers.
Yeah, I made burgers. One time I made some tacos.
And then we ate them. The end.
Okay, well, you got to figure out which one was a lie. Okay, so one time I bought a smokeless grill. Okay. Actually, it was given to me. The smokeless grill was given to me. I was very excited about it. I'd never seen a smokeless grill before. This is right after we get married. And so my wife and I, in the middle of the winter, we wanted to do some grilling. And so I thought, well, we have this smokeless grill. So I set it up in the kitchen, and we grilled and just about killed ourselves because of so much smoke in the house for quite a while. So that's one. Smokeless grills aren't truly smokeless. 2, the very first gas grill that I ever bought for my home, I put on a patio, and very excited about it, and did not realize the closeness of how close it was to the wall, and I broke a 5.5-foot plate glass window in our front window. Then from the heat, and then the last one was the first time that I got somebody gave me a replacement propane tank. Mm-hmm. The hookup was wrong, and I started a fire from the grill all the way down to the tank, and almost exploded the tank. So those are my 3.
First, let me first of all say that all 3 of those were told very convincingly. And also, I believe that your first story is true because you immediately and instinctively said it was given to you, the smokeless grill.
Yeah.
And everybody in ministry, when they first start out, are given things. So that one has to be true. Yeah. So I'm going to say that one's true.
Okay.
And then you broke a...
It was true, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm down to 2.
That was now you're down to 2.
Okay, so I'm going to say that the thing that is false is you started a fire down the hose to the connector. And the reason why is because I can believe the heat thing escaping your knowledge, perhaps, but I just don't see you. Well, you're not necessarily the handy guy.
Why do you say that? Just because I have scars all over my body from power tools?
Yeah, I'm still going to go with that. That's the false one.
That I accidentally started a fire?
Where the connecting propane tank is.
Okay, well, you're correct.
Yes!
You're correct. Yeah.
Yes!
So the very first house we ever owned, we were so proud of it. And the one thing was there wasn't like a deck or anywhere. Uh-huh. And so there was a little slab of concrete out front. And so I got made railings and the little, slats and all that kind of stuff. It was really nice. We made this little sitting area. We were so proud of ourselves. And I put my grill right in front of the big plate glass window because I thought, that's great. It's so easy access into the house. And fired it up the first time and destroyed a $1,000 window.
Wow. And so then how cheap?
Which was 1/40 of the value of our house.
I was going to say, how much money did you save now in their little patio thing?
Yeah, exactly.
You could have expanded your patio for $1,000.
Yeah, I think it was. I think we paid $45,000 for that house.
Wow.
I'd love to have that back.
Well, yeah, and, no kidding.
And the window was $1,000. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a expensive window even today.
It was huge. It was a huge window.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I am glad that you didn't hook up a propane tank wrong, because actually that's the scariest of all the scenarios. Right.
I have had big fires, but never from a propane.
So before we move on, Jeff, I do have a question. When you almost killed yourself with the smokeless grill that wasn't smokeless, did your fire alarm go off?
No, there were no fire alarms in our apartment.
Nice.
It was the 80s, man, or 90s. It was 1990, 91, 92. What is it? 1992 is when it happened. So,
that's hilarious.
So back then they just figured you need to be smart enough to figure out how to get out of the house. Right. If it's smoking and you're coughing, get out.
If you're asleep, well.
So somebody hit Bonnie's dad actually was one who gave us that little grill, and then somebody down the street. We move into this apartment, and somebody knew us, and so they were a married couple, and they came over because we'd only been married for just a few weeks. They came over to 2 steaks.
Wow!
And so these are the first steaks I'd had in quite a while as a college kid. So all excited about it. Got my grilling salts out and all this kind of stuff, and fired that bad boy up. It's right on my kitchen table. Wow. Next thing you know, we can't breathe in the house. We got all the windows open. It's January in Northwest Indiana. It's like 5 degrees outside. We got the windows out. We're sitting on the floor eating our steaks.
Wow, that's great. That's a great visual right there.
Yeah. No, actually for like a month afterwards, the whole house smelled like steak. Every time we opened the door, you'd be like, "Man, I'm hungry."
Yeah, that's funny.
Yep,
steaks embedded into your furniture.
It really was. Yeah, it was horrible. Okay, well, hey, as you mentioned, we are looking at festivals and seasons, and this really drives, and still does even to this day, these festivals still drive the Jewish calendar. Right? It drives so much of their society. And so I think that they're really important for us to understand what God was thinking and why he did these things. And so it's kind of a long chapter, but it goes kind of in a pretty quick fashion. So we'll try to get through it, see what happens. Leviticus chapter 23, and we'll start with verse 1. It said, "The Lord said to Moses, give the following instructions to the people of Israel. These are the Lord's appointed festivals, which you are to proclaim as official days for holy assembly. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath day of complete rest, an official day for holy assembly. It's the Lord's Sabbath day, and it must be observed wherever you live. In addition to the Sabbath, these are the Lord's appointed festivals, the official days for holy assembly that are to be celebrated at their proper times each year. The Lord's Passover begins at sundown on the 14th day of the first month. On the next day, the 15th day of the month, you must begin celebrating the Festival of Unleavened Bread. This festival to the Lord continues for 7 days, and during that time, the bread you eat must be made without yeast. On the first day of the festival, all the people must stop their ordinary work and observe an official holy day for assembly. For 7 days, you must present special gifts to the Lord. On the 7th day, the people must again stop all their ordinary work to observe an official day for holy assembly. Then the Lord said to Moses, give the following instructions to the people of Israel. When you enter the land that I'm giving you and you harvest its first crops, bring the priest a bundle of grain from the first cutting of your grain harvest. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest will lift it up before the Lord so it may be accepted on your behalf. On that same day, you must sacrifice a 1-year-old male lamb with no defects as a burnt offering to the Lord. With it, you must present a grain offering consisting of 4 quarts of choice flour moistened with olive oil. It'll be a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. You must also offer 1 quart of wine as a liquid offering. Do not eat any bread or roasted grain or fresh kernels on that day until you bring this offering to your God. This is a permanent law for you, and it must be observed from generation to generation wherever you live. From the day after the Sabbath, the day you bring the bundle of grain to be lifted up as a special offering, count off 7 full weeks. Keep counting until the day of the 7th Sabbath, 50 days later. Then present an offering of new grain to the Lord. From wherever you live, bring 2 loaves of bread to be lifted up before the Lord as a special offering. Make these loaves from your 4 quarts of choice flour and bake them with yeast, and they'll be an offering to the Lord from the first of your crops. Along with the bread, present 7 one-year-old male lambs with no defects, 1 young bull, 2 rams as burnt offerings to the Lord. These burnt offerings, together with grain offerings and liquid offerings, will be a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. And then you must offer 1 male goat as a sin offering and 2 one-year-old male lambs as a peace offering. Priest to lift up the 2 lambs as a special offering to the Lord, together with the loaves representing the first of your crops. These offerings, which are holy to the Lord, belong to the priests. That same day will be proclaimed an official day of holy assembly, a day on which you should do no ordinary work. It's a permanent law for you. It must be observed from generation to generation wherever you live. When you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your field. Do not pick up what the harvesters drop. Leave it for the poor and the foreigners living among you. I'm the Lord your God. Lord said to Moses, give the following instructions to the people of Israel. On the first day of the appointed month in early autumn, you are to observe a day of complete rest. It'll be an official day for holy assembly, a day commemorated with loud blasts of a trumpet. You must do no ordinary work on that day. Instead, you are to present special gifts to the Lord. Then the Lord said to Moses, be careful to celebrate the Day of Atonement on the 10th day of that same month, 9 days after the Festival of Trumpets. You must observe it as an official day for holy assembly, a day to deny yourselves and present special gifts to the Lord. Do no work during that entire day, because it's the Day of Atonement, when offerings of purification are made for you, making you right with the Lord your God. All who do not deny themselves that day will be cut off from God's people. I will destroy anyone among you who does any work on that day. You must not do any work at all. This is a permanent law for you, and it must be observed from generation to generation wherever you live. This will be a Sabbath day of complete rest for you, and on that day you must deny yourselves. This day of rest will begin at sundown on the 9th day of the month and extend until sundown on the 10th day. The Lord said to Moses, give the following instructions to the people of Israel. Begin celebrating the Festival of Shelters on the 15th day of the appointed month, 5 days after the Day of Atonement. This festival to the Lord will last for 7 days. On the first day of the festival, you must proclaim an official day for holy assembly when you must do no ordinary work. And for 7 days, you must present special gifts to the Lord. The 8th day is another holy day on which you present your special gifts to the Lord. And this will be a solemn occasion. No ordinary work may be done that day. These are the Lord's appointed festivals. Celebrate them each year as official days for the holy assembly by presenting special gifts to the Lord. Burnt offerings, grain offerings, sacrifices, and liquid offerings, each on its proper day. These festivals must be observed in addition to the Lord's regular Sabbath days, and the offerings are in addition to your personal gifts and the offerings you give to fulfill your vows, and the voluntary offerings you present to the Lord. Remember that the 7-day festival to the Lord, the Festival of Shelters, begins on the 15th day of the appointed month after you've harvested all the produce of the land. The first day and the 8th day of the festival will be days of complete rest. On the first day, gather branches from magnificent trees, palm fronds, boughs from leafy trees, and willows that grow by the streams. Then celebrate with joy before the Lord your God for 7 days. You must observe this festival to the Lord for 7 days every year. This is a permanent law for you, and it must be observed in the appointed month from generation to generation. For 7 days you must live outside in little shelters. All native-born Israelites must live in shelters, and this will remind each new generation of Israelites that I made their ancestors live in shelters when I rescued them from the land of Egypt. I'm the Lord your God. So Moses gave the Israelites these instructions regarding the annual festivals of the Lord.
All right, well, let's pray and go.
Okay. Yeah, it was a lot.
Gee whiz. That was like 5 minutes of solid reading.
Well, I like the last one where God makes them have an annual camp out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you like that part.
Yeah. That was great.
That's good for Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the religious festivals. So you have the festival of, number 1, unleavened bread is what we talked about.
That's right.
Then celebration of the first harvest.
Right.
There's the festival of the harvest. There's the Festival of Trumpets. There's the Day of Atonement, and then the Festival of Shelters.
Right.
So a lot of festivals.
Yes.
And in fact, it is it's crazy almost, right? But I guess if you think about it,
we have more in our culture.
We have more in our culture, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
So I struggle with this when I'm sure. I think most people do, actually, which is sort of like knowledge versus relevance, right?
Right.
So I'm more of a, attracted to relevance and not necessarily like attracted for knowledge's sake. And don't get me wrong, all of God's word is important. I do believe that. all of God's word is, symbolic, and it means something, and it reflects God's nature. I mean, there's something to learn from every verse in the Bible. Right. So I do believe that. But, sometimes it's hard to translate. And, you read something like this, and you're like, okay, all right, God,
what do we do with this?
What does it mean for me?
Well,
right?
especially for a show like this, where it's basically two guys. We open the Bible, no prep, and just go, what's God telling us today?
Right.
And you go, well.
Yeah, right,
yeah.
right.
Well, I think there's several things. There's several things in here. One, first of all, he re-ups one of the 10 Commandments with regard to the Sabbath day. He's like, don't mess with the Sabbath day.
Right.
Matter of fact, ignoring the Sabbath causes a lot of trouble throughout the rest of the Bible. You read most of the minor prophets, he's pretty ticked off about them skipping the Sabbath day. Jesus later on re-ups that one and says, hey, man isn't for the Sabbath. The Sabbath is for man. It's a gift to you to rest. And a lot of our problems, and I think physical problems and emotional, relational problems, are that we don't ever take our foot off the gas, right? And then we just wonder, God, rescue my marriage. God's like, I've been giving you a day off every week for you to invest in your family. Oh, God, lower my blood pressure. I've been giving you a whole day off every week, and we refuse it, right? So a lot of these, we know the health benefits, we know the mental benefits, we know the relational benefits of taking one 24-hour period off every week. We just don't want to do it. Or we feel like we can't do it. Like somehow we know something God doesn't know. Right? My life's really hard. And so he's re-upping that. Hey, and we know that Jesus said that the Sabbath is a gift. Then you see the rest of these, and he tends to build these festivals around Sabbaths. He wants you to count 7 Sabbaths out, and then, kick off this new thing. And so he wants the Sabbath to be the center of their lives, because that day is supposed to be for them, for their families, and for assembly, gathering together as believers in God. And it sets them apart as a culture from all the other cultures around them. And if you think about it, I was in Vienna, Austria on 4th of July, and my cab driver goes, "Hey, today's a special day for you, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "It must be amazing to be 4th of July in America." Right? Isn't that funny? He has this picture of how great it is to be an American on 4th of July. Yeah. And he was like, is it hard? Is it hard for you to not be home for 4th of July right now?
Yeah.
And, so he had this understanding that there is something very unique and very special for Americans on that day. And there was. We kind of had a sense of loss that there's no fireworks going off. There wasn't any, parades happening, none of that kind of stuff.
Did I tell you what I did?
No, what'd you do?
I went and saw the Detroit Symphony Orchestra at Greenfield Village.
Isn't that fabulous?
And they were playing as the fireworks were going off.
Yeah.
And it was the most amazing.
Fabulous.
It was fabulous.
This is the first year in probably 10 years that we missed it, because we're out of country. Did you know I played 15 of those concerts?
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I told Liz that you were in it.
Yeah.
Now, wait. You're saying that's what you go to every year?
Every year.
You do at Greenfield Village?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't even know it went on.
Yeah, it's fantastic. If you don't know, Greenfield Village is a place that Henry Ford built as an outdoor museum, where he brought in some of the, Thomas Edison's workshops and where the Wright brothers invented the airplane, the actual buildings. He moved them there.
Yes.
And Noah Webster's home, where he wrote the English dictionary.
Yeah.
So, but it's just a really great place for fireworks. And the Detroit Symphony is one of the top 5 symphonies in the world. So
yeah, it was
really
amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
Amazing.
Great experience. So that's what these are. These are building their culture. So when you have the Passover, obviously we know what that is. We just talked about the Passover, right?
Yep.
So the Passover, that wasn't something that happened back then. This is something I want you to relive and reenact every year. Right, I want you to. And so he takes them through the unleavened bread, the sacrifice with the animal, the way that you're cooking your food. I want you to tell your children these things, right? And he's trying to drive this culture. They were slaves that were embedded in the Egyptian culture for 400 years.
Yeah.
And he said, now listen, you're out of that culture. You need a new culture for you and your family. And I would say for people, moms and dads that listen to this podcast, you lived 40 years in slavery, and God set you free, and now you need to have new celebrations for your family, where you drive home the meaning of Easter, you drive home the meaning of Christmas, you drive home the meaning of faith, right? The fact that we take one day off because we honor God and God's laws are important, right? All these things. You notice he says, if you skip these things, you're going to be cut off from the people, right? So it's a big issue for him, and I think it's important for us as Christians to have holy days. That's what a holiday is. Holy days set apart for re-educating our family, reminding ourselves, celebrating what God did. And so that's the whole idea behind the camp out with the Festival of Shelters. They traveled and wandered in the wilderness for 40 years in these little shelters. So that's what that is, all those things. But I think the most important one is, for us, is going to be the Day of Atonement. But yeah.
Well, it's an incredible overview there where you were talking about we all need a new culture once you realize that we're set free from the bondage. You said slavery, right? You're talking
slavery of sin.
Slavery of sin, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of people who, they try to get the benefits of God in their lives without changing the culture.
Right.
So they're just like, oh yeah, we'll just sprinkle a little God in,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I saw a comedian trying to defend atheism versus creationism with a God, and he's dropping F-bombs as he's doing it.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, this is the most juxtaposed.
Right.
It was just really weird. It's like, well, this is a great argument if you just clean it up, right? Because otherwise,
right.
Anyway, it's just weird to have the two cultures mixed, whereas God's saying, hey man, I have saved you, but I have saved you from your life in order to give you a new one.
Right. What God's not doing is saying, hey, when you guys celebrate the Festival of Osiris, or when you celebrate the Festival of Ra,
right?
He's saying, no, get rid of your old belief system and culture, and I want you to have a new belief system and a new culture, and I want you to build it around the reminding yourself of all that I did for you.
Well, the Bible tells us that He is making us more and more like His Son.
That's right.
So our goal is to, we're transitioning from glory to glory, the Scripture says.
Right.
So we are to, become never sinless, but, we can sin less, right?
Absolutely.
And we can work toward, these reflections in place. And so I was thinking, at the very beginning, I mentioned about relevance. And I started thinking about, you said we have more in our culture. So we have 4th of July to remind us of something, right? We have Labor Day to remind us of something. We have Memorial Day to remind us of something. And in the church, I think that the two big ordinances in the church, it's not that much different than baptism or communion.
That's right.
So baptism is a perfect symbol. And not only that, but like every bit of baptism is the symbol. Right. So, Paul talks about, what it means to, just the water itself, Jesus even said, baptized with water. He was talking about it in John 3. Paul says when you go under, you go under just as if Jesus went under the earth in the same likeness when He was buried, and you're raised to walk just like the resurrection. And so it's all completely symbolic to remind us that we have new life, and communion reminds us of the price that was paid for us.
Right.
And so, we observe those things, and God commands us and says, hey, the purpose of this is to, connect to something that happened a long time ago.
Right.
This reflects my nature. This reflects my goodness. This reflects my love and the price and the sacrifice that was paid for you. And it's really not that much different than these festivals.
Right. And then it builds community. It builds family and it builds community.
Right.
It gave them something to really build around. A lot of times, I think God does a transformative work in our lives, and then we wonder what happens. How come it didn't transfer to our children or teenagers or whatever? It's because we've let them live their entire life in the Egyptian culture or in the worldly culture, right? And not reminding them and pulling them into these reminders within the Christian worldview. And so that's why He sets these up. And I think it's important for every one of us to go, all right, God, I'm going to set aside a weekly time with you, a daily time with you. That's one of those things. Communion and baptisms I'm going to celebrate. And then throughout the year, when it comes to Christmas and Easter and some of these other significant religious holidays, I'm going to make sure I'm going to speak up about it. I'm going to talk about it. Thanksgiving being another one. So
yeah, that's great. Well, hey, that's a lot that we unpacked there just in those festival verses. So,
yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, really fun. So that is our time. And so hopefully we will see you again next time on The Bible Guys.